Here are 6 middle-class habits that will keep you broke forever. And I'm not gonna pretend like I didn't commit every single one of these on my journey. In fact, for the vast majority of my life, I fell victim to each and every single one of these. So I can speak very clearly from firsthand experience. You're gonna want to avoid these if you don't want to spend your entire life broke. Number 1 is don't confuse worrying for planning. A lot of times we perseverate when something is going wrong, or we're anxious about all the things that could go wrong. And because we're getting what my girlfriend calls whirly brain, and we're spiraling around the problem and we're thinking about it constantly, can't sleep at night, often we'll mistake that for some kind of positive plan. And the truth is that worrying is not planning. Planning is sitting down and triaging. What are all the issues? What am I thinking about here? What are the potential outcomes? What could go well? What could go wrong? What are the problems that need to be solved? Laying them out and then having a systematic process for here's what I'm going to do next. If your worrying does not lead to an here's what I will do next outcome, then it's you're just wasting time and energy. Now, psychologists actually did a really interesting study on this. They looked at the coping techniques of men versus women, and specifically the idea of rumination versus distraction. And what they found is that women tend to ruminate, whereas men tend to distract. And what that means is women, they like to talk through a problem. When they have an issue, they want to talk about it, they want to think about it, they want to work through it, and they ruminate. Men, on the other hand, when something goes wrong, they quite often just go and distract themselves. They go have a beer, they go play a game, they go do something else, and they clear their minds. And the coping technique for each individual tends to skew along gender lines. So women tend to be more ruminating and men tend to be more distracting. Well, what the psychologists found is that the men were actually, with long-term outcomes in relation to the thing that was causing the problem, men tended to fare better. Whereas women, they tended to not make as much progress. They tended to have more stress and anxiety. And the reason is men, when they go and distract, they get away from the worry, they come back clear-minded, clear emotion, and then they can calculate a plan of action. Now, this isn't meant to say men are better than women or anything like that. Just understand that when things go wrong, it can be very easy to fall into the ruminating trap, into the worrying hole, but nothing ever gets fixed there. So you got to create a plan of action for what you're going to do next and then go and attack it. The next mistake you need to avoid here is mistaking planning for action. It's one thing to have a plan and say, this is what I'm going to do. These are my intentions. It's another thing to actually take the plan and start executing it. And this is very important because we think by creating the plan, we've taken steps towards resolving the problem, but you actually haven't, right? The first step towards fixing the problem is executing the plan. Yes, you need a plan, but don't confuse that with actually moving towards the desired end state. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up, is they spend all their time planning and none of their time doing. And the thing I always try to remind myself is that the universe does not care how you feel. The universe does not care what you intend. It does not care what you plan. The universe only responds to what you do. And so when you have a problem, something's going wrong, and you create the plan, that's great. That's a step. That's like step 0. Step 1 is executing that plan. So don't confuse planning for action. 3, don't confuse action for progress. Just because you're doing stuff doesn't mean you're doing the right stuff. There's a difference between being busy and being effective. And most people, they're doing a lot of stuff. They're moving around with chaotic energy, and they look at the end of the day at their to-do list and look at all the things that I've accomplished. And yet, if you were to ask or to measure what is actually moving the needle, you would find the needle didn't move at all. And so there's a big difference between just chaotic energy that's spastically moving around and doing things, that's action, versus progress, which is right action towards the right goal. The next thing that we have to avoid is confusing hearing for listening. Hearing for listening. Quite often, hearing is a very interesting thing because hearing is a passive process. You cannot shut off your ears. From the day you're born till the day you die, barring you go deaf, your ears will always be on. You can't close them like you can your eyes or your mouth or anything, right? So they're always absorbing exterior stimuli. However, our brains are very good at filtering out 99% of that. Just think of sit and be present in the room that you're at right now and observe how much sound there is. So much that you're not even aware of. Like behind me, I can hear this fireplace, the hissing, the crackling of it, right? I can hear the HVAC system. I can hear the reverberation of my voice in this room. There's so many things that you could hear, but only if you listen to them. So hearing is a passive process. Listening requires intent. It's an active process. And a lot of people, they think they're listening when all they're doing is hearing. And this is very important when you're talking to somebody, to actually listen to what they're saying and not just hear the words that are coming out of their mouth. And often that requires a lot of energy and a lot of intentionality, which is why most of us don't do it. Next thing that we need to avoid is confusing criticism for feedback. Criticism is designed to hurt. Feedback is designed to help. When you get 99% of what people think is feedback, it's not feedback. It's their attempt to bring the other person down a peg, right? So don't confuse, oh, I'm being critical. Oh, I was actually just giving feedback. That's what we tell ourselves. But the reality is, are you giving it with the true intent of helping them become better? Or is it so that you can bring them down and move yourself up in the social game, the hierarchy? A lot of times you will find yourself criticizing things that didn't need to be criticized. A very good example of this is I had a gentleman comment in the video recently. He goes, that microphone is a professional microphone that's designed to be on a stand. It will look more professional and sound better if you have it on a stand. That's not feedback. That's not helpful. He's not trying to help me be better. What he's doing is criticizing in the hopes of showing how much he knows and how I'm doing it wrong. Instead of saying, this is a stylistic choice. I have a stand. I have a microphone stand. I know how to use the mic, right? It's a stylistic choice. And so he's criticizing to elevate himself and try to bring me down. So just be aware, when are you criticizing and when are you giving feedback? The last thing that you must not confuse if you want to, break these middle class habits. And I see this, they're just so prevalent. This last one in particular, this is one that I struggle with for a long time, is confusing your net worth with your self-worth. It's very easy to track money in the bank and see as a consequence, that's a scoreboard. I'm winning the money game. I have more money than this person, right? And we tend to overvalue that then, because I can have this nice car, this nice house, all these things. I must therefore be better than you. And yet when you have won the money game, you will look back and realize that you don't feel any more valuable. You'll still feel just as empty, because they're entirely different things. Your self-worth comes as a manifestation of who you are, your beliefs, your skills, your traits, the things that cannot be taken from you. And your money can be taken from you. And so to tie your self-worth to an extrinsic property that somebody else could take, that's a losing proposition. So don't play that game. Don't confuse net worth with self-worth. Do not commit these other 5 middle-class habits, and you, my friend, will be on your way to living an abundant, beautiful, wealthy life.